Okay, our learning is Le'ilai Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kamen Ruvain. We're going to begin on the Mishnah on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and we're going to make our way, God willing, to the top of Yud Daled. Some challenging, some new concepts about Tuma and Tara, but hopefully we'll walk away as real experts in that topic. So here we go. So we have the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Ve'elu min halachos sha'amru ba'lias Chananya ben Chizkiah ben Garon. So these are the halachos, and these are the halachos, which were taught in the attic of Chananya ben Chizkiah ben Garon. Keep in mind, their attics back in the day was kind of like their office space. So Chananya ben Chizkiah ben Garon was in an attic, and they came up with halachos there. Okay, we're going to discuss this. We're going to talk about what this is all about. Sha'alu levakro, they came to visit him. Okay, we're going to come back and discuss what he was doing in this attic, why he was working there, and many of the sages came to visit him. Nimnu, they counted. They had a big discussion about what they wanted to enact, not enact, and they counted. They voted. V'rabu Beis Shammai al Beis Hillel. And Beis Shammai over here was more of a majority than Beis Hillel. Typically, we know it's very often the opposite. But over here, Beis Shammai there was a majority of Beis Shammai students over Beis Hillel, and therefore they went with the rulings of Beis Shammai over Beis Hillel. And V'yud Ches Dvarim Gazru Bo B'Yom. And 18 enactments were decreed on that day by the school of Shammai, and over the opinion of Beis Hillel. We're going to discuss what those different enactments are. Many of them discuss Tuma and Tara. And so we're going to, again, delve into that whole topic. But that's the Mishnah. Okay, says the Gemara. Amrle Abayil Rav Yosef. Elutnan o ve'elutnan. When the Mishnah said, these are the halachos, does it say, these are the halachos, or and these are the halachos? What is that? What's the difference? And I know our Mishnah does say the word and, but they weren't sure about what the proper Masorah was. Was it and these are, or is it these are? Okay, so what's the difference? Ve'elutnan. If it says, and these, hani to amran, that includes the ones that we recently mentioned in the Mishnah before, right? If you say, and these, that means that the ones that follow, but also the ones before. Oh, elutnan, or is it saying, these are, debe'ina l'meimer kaman, the ones that are coming up. So Tashma, we bring a brisa which answers this question. Tashma, we have a brisa, ein polin la'or haner, vein kor la'or haner. It quotes the two halachos that we just had in the Mishnah before, that you don't delouse by the candle, by the lamp, and you don't read by the lamp. Ve'elu min halachos amr b'lias Chananya ben Chizkiah ben Garon. And it concludes that statement by saying, and these are the things that were taught in that attic. So clearly, it's ve'elu, like the text we have in our Mishnah, and it's saying, and these, it's going on the ones that we had before as well. Okay, so meaning the last two halachos that we had in the Mishnah before are also part of the 18 things that were decreed in this attic. Shema mina ve'elu tnan shema mina. So we hear from here that it's ve'elu and these, including the ones from the Mishnah before, and that is conclusive. 2 dots. Tan Rabbanan. We have a brisa. Mi kasa Megillas Tainus. Who wrote Megillas Tainus? What was Megillas Tainus? Megillas Tainus was a book that was written down. It was unique because at that time there weren't things that were written down, but this was a book that was written down. And although it's called the scroll of fasts, it's actually the opposite. It's a scroll of days that you cannot fast. It's a scroll of days that special things happen to the Jewish people, and therefore the sages of the day decreed that on those dates you're not allowed to fast because it was a day that was a quasi-holiday because of all the good things that happened, and therefore you cannot fast on those days. That's what Megillas Tainus is called. Who compiled this book? Who compiled this scroll? Amru, they said, Chananya ben Chizkiah v'siyato. It was Chananya ben Chizkiah, the same person we just mentioned in our Mishnah. He was a great leader of the Jewish people. He's able to organize things, and he was the one who compiled this list. And the Mishnah, the Brisa continues, She'mechavin es hatzaros. They loved tragedies. What does it mean they love tragedies? It seems like a very strange, masochistic type of statement. No. What that means is that, the way Rashi and other commentators explain, is that they recognized how unworthy they were of any goodness. And therefore, when bad things happened, right, we spoke about this yesterday, I think, a little bit, right? When bad things happened, they accepted it, believe Shalom, they said, God, I really deserve these things. Whatever bad happens to me, I really deserve it. And therefore, when God went ahead and still saved them, wow, that's incredible, right? In other words, if I recognize I'm really deserving of the bad that happens to me, and then good happens to me, then I feel really, really, really grateful. And therefore, he says they compiled this list of days because as holidays because they were so grateful over the fact that God saved them for all these things. They recognized they loved, quote unquote, loved the tsaros, meaning they accepted upon themselves, we deserve the tsaros, and therefore when good things happen, they said unbelievable, and they made it as a holiday. Okay?
These are not personal events.
These are not personal events. No, these are communal events. Correct. These are bad things these are times that God saved the community from a tragedy. And they said, so again, they accepted as a community we deserve the bad, and then when the good happened, then when they were saved from it, they said, unbelievable, this is crazy, this is amazing, and they made it into a holiday. So the reason that they made all these holidays, right, what the Gemara is coming to explain, or the Bryce is coming to explain, is like, where all these, how can they be making so many holidays? It comes from a mindset of appreciating that we really deserve the bad, and therefore there's this incredible sense of gratitude for the good that happens as well. Okay? Rav Shimon Gamliel now comments on this brisa. We also appreciate when bad things happen, meaning we also appreciate when bad things happen to our community, we recognize we're also not deserving. Okay, so why don't we have, now the implicit question is, so why don't we have our own Megillas Tainus? Why don't we have our own whole list of days that you can't fast? These should be holidays. So we'll see three reasons why. One version of what Rav Shimon Gamliel said is that if we were to start writing down all the times we're saved, it would be endless, because we go through so many tzaros in the times of Rav Shimon Gamliel that like every day something bad is supposed to happen, and the fact that we're here as a community, it's a miracle, right? It's a little miracle, and therefore we never be able to fast. It's like we never say tachanun, which I guess some people wouldn't complain, right? It basically would be like it would be endless, because we face so many tzaros and we're saved by all these things. Speaking, it would never be enough. Davar acher, another version of what Rav Shimon Gamliel said as to why we don't have our own Megillas Tainus. Ein shota nifka. What this means is that someone who is not mentally competent doesn't feel when they're like injured. In other words, someone who really is out of it doesn't feel that they're injured. And what he's saying is that we don't even know. It's kind of the opposite. It's not that there's so many times we'd be grateful for. We're beaten down so much. We don't even know when bad things are happening to us to know that we're safe from them. In other words, there's so many tzaras that we're surrounded by that, like, just like someone who is not fully there doesn't necessarily recognize when they're injured, so we don't even know when bad things are happening to us, because so many bad things are happening to us. Okay? That's version 2. Davar acher, version 3, which is similar to version 2. Ein basar hames margish beizmal. The flesh of the dead doesn't feel when it's touched by the scalpel. So basically, you have a knife that cuts into dead skin, that cuts into the dead. It doesn't feel it. So similarly, we too, it's similar to the one before. We've been deadened by all the tragedies that have befallen us, and therefore we don't recognize all the times that bad things are happening to us, and again, therefore we're unable to be as grateful as we need to be. Okay, one way or another, Rav Shimon Gamliel saying that's why we don't have all these holidays. The bottom line is Megillas Tainus was we've moved on from Megillas Tainus. We don't celebrate those holidays. Fine. Ask the Gemara on the last approach, on the last version. Eini, is that so? Rav Yitzchak taught us, Kasha rima lameis kemachad b'basar chai. A worms to the dead is like a needle in the skin. In other words, it sounds like we're saying that the dead do feel things that happen to it. You just said, the last version said, you don't feel the knife that goes into the dead. Yet Rav Yitzchak taught us that the dead feel the worms that are burrowing through the body. Shneimar quotes a pasuk in Eov. Ach besaro alav yichav, the flesh hurts. V'nafsho alav te'avel, and the soul will mourn itself. So meaning we're talking about someone who's dead, and they feel pain of the flesh. So it sounds like the dead do feel. Now, the Mefarshim explain, or some Mefarshim explain, that they don't literally feel, but the soul which is still alive, the body's dead, but the soul which is still alive is attuned to the fact, is aware of the fact that the worms are burrowing through the body, and it's somehow painful to the soul that these things are happening, right? So in other words, the body is actually dead, the body doesn't have senses, but the neshama which is alive is still in some way connected to the body, even though it's separate, and therefore when the body starts to be eaten by worms, there's a pain that the soul experiences during that time, okay? So that's the Gemara's question. You just said that a dead person doesn't feel the knife, yet it feels the worms. What's going on? So rather say ein basar hamesha b'chai margish beizmal, that dead flesh on a person doesn't feel a knife. In other words, sometimes you can have dead flesh on a person, whether through calluses or whether through disease. You could cut that dead flesh and you won't feel it. But it's true, a person who's actually dead, in some way their flesh is more feeling than the dead flesh of a live person, right? So basically it's just tweaking the language that was used. Dead people do feel in some way the erosion of the body, the decomposition of the body. That's part of the kapara that takes place, right? The Mefarshim explain that when we die, when our body rots, when our body is eaten by worms, that is part of the atonement that takes place to the body after death, and it's felt in some way by the soul, even though, again, the soul is not really connected, it's somewhat connected. But what Rav Shimon Gamliel was talking about was that if you have dead skin and then you put a knife through it, you don't feel it. And that's what he meant, that we too are suffering, is like we're deadened to the suffering, and therefore we don't feel it. Okay? End of that Gemara. Rav Yehuda Marav. One more statement about Hananiah and Chizkiah. Rav Yehuda ben Rav in the name of Rav says, Bram Zachar Oso Ish Latov. We should remember this person for good. Who is that? Hananiah ben Chizkiah Shemo, and his name is Hananiah ben Chizkiah Shel Malehu. Without him, Nignaz Sefer Yecheskel. Yecheskel, the book of Yecheskel, would have been put away. They wouldn't have kept it. They would have taken it out of the canon. Shayudvarim Sosrin Divrei Torah, because there are sections in Yecheskel where it contradicts the words of the Torah. Which week do we read Yecheskel as Haftorah? I'm trying to remember which week it is. Anyone remember? Anyone know? Okay, there's a couple of times, but basically there's a number of sections in Yecheskel where a couple of the laws that he lists seem to contradict laws that are written in the Torah. All right, and so meaning he lists laws, he lists halachos, and those laws contradict what the Torah says. And so basically, people are reading the book of Yecheskel and they're like, "Whoa, this is like heretical, right?" There are other books, right? Keep in mind, there's Ben Sira. There are other books that were written during that era that we just never canonized. Chazal didn't take as part of the canon. On the contrary, they treated them as heretical and said you can't read these books, right? So Yecheskel almost was in that category. We almost basically had 23 books of Tanakh because Yecheskel wouldn't have been included, despite all the great prophecies, because there are a number of sections which seem to be overt contradictions, with what's written in the Torah. And Yehuda Yecheskel ben Guria, Hananiah and Chizkiah ben Garon, came along, and he went ahead and Ma'asa, what did he do? Helu, lo, gimel meos garbe shem, and they brought him like 300 jugs of oil. In other words, a lot of oil for lamps. V'yasha ba'aliyah v'darshan, and he sat in his attic and he worked it through. He basically spent this time and he basically reconciled all the contradictions, explaining each one. We're not going to go through it all right now, but it's worth noting, and it comes up in one of the Haftarahs, and I'm blanking on which one. But basically, there are a number of sections in Yecheskel which do contradict at face value the Torah, and he came along and reconciled it and enabled the book of Yecheskel to stay in the canon, to stay as part of Tanakh. Okay? Fine. So that's the attic, and that's why they were visiting him. And now we're going to get into the 18 enactments that were voted upon and that Beis Shammai overruled Beis Hillel. And let's get into those 18 enactments. Before we do so, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into how Tumah works, or let's just do a bit of an introduction, and then we'll see the next section. Okay, so Tumah is something which you could contract from someone else. Tumah, just like a disease that passes on from someone else, Tumah to another person or to other items. Similarly, Tumah is something which could go transfer from one person or from one item to the other, but there are a lot of rules. And just like you have, you can imagine that if most potent in source number 1, as it goes to source number 2, it gets less potent, and source number 3 gets less potent, etc., etc. Similarly, Tumah, it starts off very strong, and then as it goes down the line, as it goes transfer to transfer to transfer, the potency of Tumah is weakened. Okay, that's very broadly speaking. Now let's give a little more details to that. So we have levels of Tumah. The first level of Tumah is something called Avi Avos Tumah, which is a corpse. A human corpse is considered Avi Avos Tumah. That's the highest level of Tumah. On a similar level is something called the Av HaTumah, literally father of Tumah. Included in that is a carcass of an animal, a sheret, certain types of creepy creatures, okay, a zav, we spoke about before. This person has certain discharges, and a nida. Those are Av HaTumah, and they have quite significant potency to pass on Tumah to something else, okay? So if any of those Av HaTumahs are in contact with either people, okay, utensils, clothing, food, or liquids, then those things contract the Tumah, okay? They become Tameh, and the level of Rishon L'Tumah. Now they are first, meaning there's the father, and now there's first degree of Tumah. Still with me? Right? On those 4 categories, okay? Now, that's all first level of Tumah. Now, if any of those things, the person who contacted the Avatuma, or the clothing that contacted the Avatuma, or the food or the liquids that contact the Avatuma, now contact something else, the next level is something called Sheni L'Tumah, right? Very, very straightforward, right? It comes second degree of Tumah, okay? And here on the second level of Tumah, it could now let's get into a little bit more of the 3 different types of items that become Tameh. There is Chulin. Chulin means chol, any regular type of item, food, which is not holy in any way. Okay, that's one category. There's truma. Truma are the things which are tithed and have to be given to the Kohanim, right? So that's truma. And there's kachim, things which are sanctified for the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so now new rule that we have to keep in mind: the holier something is, the more susceptible it is to tumah. Makes sense, right? The more sanctified. So therefore, kachim is the most sanctified. Truma is next, and chulin is next level under that. Okay, so as we go down the line, certain things are going to drop off. They're no longer becoming tameh. If chulin comes into contact with a rishon l'tumah, then chulin will become a sheni l'tumah, right? But if it goes down to the next level, right, it no longer will impact chulin. If on a shlishi level, it will no longer impact chulin. It will only impact kachim and truma. because chulin, because it's not so holy, is no longer susceptible to tuma. And if it goes down to the level of ravi, if there's contact at the fourth level, fourth degree tuma, it only impacts kachim. It does not impact even truma. Not so bad, right? I'm not going to test you on it, but you got the basic gist? Ross, yeah? Yeah, okay. Okay, one other thing that when we see the terminology pasul, okay, when you see the terminology tame means it is impure, and it's going to therefore hold on to that tumah and pass it on to something else. When the Gemara used the term, Mishnah, Brisa used the word pasul, that means it's invalid, but it's not a carrier in the sense it's not going to pass it on to the next level. Again, so when you see the term pasul, it means that it ends over there. When you see the word tame, that means it's passing it on, that it's still able to pass it on to the next level, right? So for example, if you say something is regarding truma, when truma is at the third level, meaning if truma contracts truma on the third level, we would not call it tame, we would say it's pasul. Since truma on the third level is not able to go down to the fourth level, therefore there it's pasul and not tame. Okay? That's all we need to know for the next few lines. So, says the Gemara, Ushmona Asar Davar Gazir, recording the Mishnah above, 18 things were decreed. Ma'ininu, what are those 18 things? Ma'ininu Shemona Asar Davar, what are the 18 things? It's not, we have a Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah is in Zavin, and we're going to assume at this point that what's found, these different decrees in this Mishnah are all part of the 18. Okay, so we're going to see 10 different rabbinic decrees in this Mishnah. Okay, hold on to your hat. We're going to just read them. We're going to know what, but we're not going to know the why. Okay, in other words, right now we're just going to read the what they are. As the Gemara in the next blot or so, the Gemara is going to explain the why behind each of these enactments. Okay, so today we're just going to do the what. Elu postal truma. These things postal truma. If we say they're postal truma, what does that mean? What level of truma is that? If it's postal truma, that means it's at the third level. That means the truma is pasul, but it's not tame. Meaning, if it's tame, it would have to be at the second or first level. By saying it's posel, that means it's at level 3, because that means it's invalid, but it doesn't pass on the it doesn't pass on the tuma to the next level. Okay, so what are those things? Ha'ochel ochel rishon. Let's say a person eats something which is a rishon l'tuma. Okay, and then that person who eats the rishon l'tuma touches truma. That truma is a shlishi, right? Because the person eats rishon, they become a sheni, and then they touch truma. So now the truma is a shlishi, okay? And therefore it's invalid. Va'ochel ochel sheni. Interestingly, a person eats a sheni, they also become a sheni. You have to ask yourself, why? Okay, we're not talking about why today. We're going to come back to that. But that's the what. The what is that someone eats a sheni l'tuma, they maintain the status of a sheni, they touch truma becomes invalid, okay? V'ashosem mashkin tamein. The same laws apply not only to eating foods, but also by drinking drinks. Rishon or sheni, they become a sheni, and therefore the truma they touch now will become a shlishi, and therefore invalid. Okay, so far so good. If a person has most of their body, their head and most of their body in water that is drawn, they become a sheni l'tuma, and the truma that they touch becomes a shlishi. Okay, and similarly, someone who's tahar, who 3 lugan of water, 3 lugan of drawn water falls over the person's head. Basically, the last 2 cases are like forms of showers. The person becomes tameh. We'll come back to that. Why? It's so strange. We're not talking about why today, we're just talking about what? In both cases, water falls over a person, drawn water, not mikvah water, drawn water falls over a person, they pour it over a person, so like a shower, the person becomes a sheni l'tuma, and therefore the truma they touch becomes a shlishi, i.e. pasul. Vasefer, a holy book. A holy book, you touch a holy book, you become a sheni l'tuma. Strange, yeah, we're going to talk about we're seeing the what's, not the whys. Vayadayim, hands that are not washed. Okay, this is actually going to bring us the laws of Netilas Yadayim, right? Hands that are not washed are a sheni l'tuma. You touch truma without washing those hands, and the truma becomes a shlishi, it becomes invalid. Okay, this is again part of the why we actually have an institution of washing Netilas Yadayim, but we'll come back to that. That's full yom. What is it full yom? So you have scenarios where someone, let's say, was a zav, and they are at the last of their 7 days of impurity. They go to the mikvah during the day. That night, they become tahar, right? But during that day that they went to the mikvah, meaning they're allowed to go to the mikvah during the day. From the time they go to the mikvah until that night, they are a sheni l'tuma. They touch something, it becomes a touch truma. The truma becomes a shlishi, i.e. invalid. Okay. Va'ochlim va'kelim shnitmu b'mashkin. Food and drink which became tameh through liquid. Okay. Period. That's the 10 things. Those things are all sheni l'tuma. Sorry, those things are all. Those things are all like sheni l'tuma. Meaning, therefore, if they come into contact with truma, the truma becomes a shlishi, which means it's invalid. It does not hold on to truma to pass on to the next level. The truma becomes a shlishi, and therefore invalid. Not so bad, right? Okay, let's go a little further. Mantana, who is the author who says ochel rishon, ve'ochel sheni, mifsal pasli, tamuye lo mitamu? Who is the opinion who says that a person who eats either rishon l'tuma or eats a sheni l'tuma, in both cases, that person who touches truma, the truma becomes a shlishi? Okay, so right, meaning that's what the Mishnah just said. Who is the one who says this? Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Rabbi Yeshua. It is Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, Ditzdaan. We have a Mishnah which shows us that this last point, is a machlokes tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer says ochel rishon. Rabbi Eliezer says the person who eats a rishon becomes a rishon. That makes actually a lot of sense, right? Ochel sheni. Someone eats a sheni. Ochel shlishi. Right? So let's pause for a second. According to Rabbi Eliezer, if a person ate rishon, they are a rishon themselves. Therefore, if they would touch truma, what would the truma become? Become tummy, right? Meaning a sheni, right? Not pasul. So clearly, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer, as Rabbi Bar Chana said. Rather, it's like the next opinion, Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua Omer ha'ochel rishon ve'ochel sheni. Right? He's the one who says that if you eat not only a sheni, but if you eat a rishon also, you become a sheni. Right? And that's what our Mishnah said. And that's why the person who ate a rishon or ate a sheni is going to then touches truma. The truma is going to become a shlishi, pasul, but not tamei. Right? Whereas according to Rabbi Eliezer, he said if a person eats a rishon, they become a rishon. If I'm a rishon and then I touch truma, the truma is a sheni. In which case it would be tamei, not pasul. With me? Okay, we got this more pretty well. The last line is going to be a little bit hard, but let's see. This last case is strange. Shlishi, if a person eats a shlishi, sheni lekodesh. Okay, this is a strange case. We're going to just unpack it very briefly. If a person eats a shlishi, they become a sheni lakodesh. Okay, so let's say I ate a shlishi latuma, okay, and then I go ahead and I touch a davar kadosh, right, meaning I touch kachim, then the kachim becomes a sheni, goes up, right? Whereas vein sheni latruma, but if a person ate a sheni of truma, then it doesn't invalidate. Then it doesn't cause the truma to become invalid. It doesn't cause it to become a sheni. Rather, it causes it to become a shlishi. It's pasul, exactly.
Pasul versus tamei.
Pasul versus tamei. So now the Gemara is just going to unpack why is it that when I eat a sheni, it causes a. Sorry, why is it when I eat? Sorry, no. I eat a shlishi. When I eat a shlishi, it doesn't even affect the truma at all, right? Because shlishi is where truma ends. If I eat a shlishi, right? So if I touch kachim, it goes up a level. If I touch truma, it does nothing because already shlishi is the lowest that it's going to go. I ate a shlishi, I touch truma, nothing happens to it. So it'll bring it to revi. There's no such thing as a revi by truma. But by kachim, it goes up a level. Why is that? So now this is the last line of the Gemara. This is a little bit hard, but let's just explain. So what are we talking about? Bechulin shenasu al taras truma. We're talking about chulin, which was made with the purity of truma. So what does that mean? What that means is as follows. Kohanim had to be in a status of purity in order to eat truma. Right? You have to eat truma in a state of purity. However, some Kohanim were very stringent, and what they did is they never even ate chulin unless they were in a state of purity. They would treat all their chulin like it was truma. Okay, and so what they would do, this was a stringency. They wanted to be recognizing like sometimes I have truma food, sometimes I have chulin food. You know what? Says the Kohanim, I'm going to eat all food. I'm going to treat all food like it's sanctified, like it's truma, and I'm going to watch over it to make sure it doesn't come into contact with anything. All's good, right? That was the stringency that some Kohanim adopted upon themselves. So let's say you have a case where you have a Kohen who has chulin, and they were treating it. That's where the words over here. Shenasu al taharas truma. They treated their chulin as if it's pure like truma. And I'm watching over it to make sure it doesn't come into contact with anything tamei, and then it comes into contact with a shlishi. Okay? So meaning I dropped the ball. I wasn't watching it properly, right? Now, I was watching it to make sure that it doesn't become tamei for truma. I was not at all thinking about it in the context of kachim. I was thinking in the perspective, in the dimension of truma, right? And so therefore I was trying to protect it from things that would invalidate truma. I wasn't thinking about kachim. Right? And now this item does become tamei, meaning I didn't watch it perfectly. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah over here, says Rabbi Yeshua, since regarding kachim I wasn't watching it at all, meaning I was watching it, but I wasn't thinking about kachim. I was treating it because the general rule was I treat my chulin like truma. So I'm protecting it like truma. Since I wasn't thinking about it regarding kachim, therefore, we have to assume the worst. We have to assume that the thing that touched it wasn't a shlishi like we thought it was. Maybe, since I wasn't paying attention for kachim, in the context of kachim, I have to assume maybe it came into contact with an av hatuma, the highest level, and therefore the thing that came into contact is not a shlishi, but rather it's really a rishon, because it came into contact with the worst of things, and therefore the food that touches it is now going to be a sheni for kachim. You see what just happened? And there's a huge stringency. We're talking about a guy who already is acting stringent because he's imposing extra levels of strictness on himself. But he's only guarding in the context of one halacha, i.e. truma, not for kachim. And therefore, when you have this food item, you say, oh yeah, it's a shlishi. Maybe it's not a shlishi. You are just paying attention to everything in the context of truma. But maybe, since you weren't thinking about kachim, maybe it's really something much more stringent. So klape, regarding truma, we say, yeah, it was a shlishi. But regarding kachim, we say, maybe you dropped the ball, maybe it's really avatuma, and the thing that touched it is a Rishon L'Tuma, and therefore the food that touches it is now going to be treated like a Sheni L'Tuma. Okay, well, very well done. We made it. We'll pick up tomorrow, God willing, with the wise. Have a wonderful day.